Hello friends, in this episode I plan to talk about the embassy, the resident embassy, and I have 3 points to make. What is an embassy after all? Second, what are the modern tasks of an embassy? And third, what is the new avatar of the embassy? Because everything changes. First, the embassy as a resident entity, that is, not the visit of a special envoy or an emissary, but the resident embassy was established in the 14th century by the Italians. That was a time when Italy had a number of states, and those states were in constant intrigue, contestation and warfare with each other. And that's when the Italians came up with the idea of having an emissary who would stay in the court of the king of the neighboring state. And after that, embassies grew in numbers, grew in their range of work, and became virtually a universal phenomenon. Every country in the world today has a network of embassies abroad, as also consulates general. We will get into consulates in another episode. I will, for the moment, only talk about embassies. So, the United States has 160 plus embassies around the world, as does China. France is the world's third biggest diplomatic power, with about 145 resident embassies, etc. And the smallest state, the tiny islands in the South Pacific, may have only 1 or 2 embassies. Now, the embassy is led by an ambassador. But the ambassador doesn't work alone. He has with him some diplomats, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 15, 20, or even 50 in some cases. And he has some non-diplomatic staff from home. They may work as accountants, they may provide communication facilities, they may work as security guards, work as secretaries, etc. The resident embassy is an institution that continues, although very many people have predicted its death. And we'll come back to that in the third point. My second big point, what are the modern tasks of an embassy? Remember, in the second episode, we talked about the Vienna Convention of Diplomatic Relations of 1961 and Article 3, which laid down 5 tasks of diplomacy. Well, if we modernize that and we think of the contemporary work of an embassy, there are in fact 4 significant tasks. The first task is promotion, which incidentally figures in the Vienna Convention. That's point number 5. Promotion means essentially to advance the interests of your country in diverse ways. You may hold a conference to mobilize foreign direct investment. You may go and visit the leader, the chief minister of a province in the country where you are posted. That's also called sub-state diplomacy, because you're not dealing with the capital, you're dealing with a province or a unit. That's important because provinces are important players in the business of diplomacy. Not just the major national capital, but also the entities that are located in the sub-units of the country. Promotion will also include holding of exhibitions, organizing cultural promotions, cultural performances, music performances, etc. The range is infinite. It can also include exchanges of students. It will include cooperation between universities of the 2 countries, or reaching out to a business management school in another country to tell them your story and what's happening in your country. The second activity which kind of connects with promotion is outreach and communication. Outreach means you reach out to others. And remember, we noted that there are many players in the business of diplomacy, business of international relations. So your outreach will extend to all of them. I'll give you an example. The diaspora. I think until 30, 40 years ago, nobody really paid very much attention to the diaspora as an instrument of building connections. We thought of the diaspora as a bunch of people connected with the home country, and we would try and defend their interests. That remains important. But today the work has changed. Today the diaspora is a player. The diaspora is conscious of its country of origin. It wants to connect with them. And on both sides, in the foreign capital and in your own capital, there is a will today, there is a desire today to build linkages through the diaspora, through their familial links, so to speak. And many examples can be given. I will talk about diaspora diplomacy in another segment. The third major activity of diplomacy today, of a resident embassy, is feedback. Now you may say, who needs an embassy to provide information on what's happening? After all, CNN, BBC and all the news channels are going to be much quicker with the news. True, they will be quicker, but they will not give you the analysis of events in which your country is at the center. That is to say, The Economist or Le Monde or the Financial Times or the New York Times will do a brilliant analysis on Costa Rica or on a forthcoming election in Brazil, but they will not look at it from the perspective of how those events might affect your country. And by their nature, published reports will not be predictive. They will not tell you what might happen in the future. A little bit of prediction, I suppose, a newspaper editor will permit, but not heavy prediction, not risky prediction. Well, in an internal document, you are allowed to be predictive. The fourth task of the modern embassy is very interesting. It's management. Now, you say, what management? Today's embassy has become a manager of bilateral relations. The old notion was embassies exist to carry out the instructions of the foreign ministry. That still operates. They do follow instructions. But because of the complexity of contacts, the density of relations, no foreign ministry has a real-time picture of what's happening in a foreign country better than the embassy. So in effect, the embassy has co-opted, has begun to use, the foreign ministry has begun to use the embassy as its partner in decision making. And modern technology, particularly intranets, which link embassies and foreign ministries into a tight network, through that, constant communication is possible between embassies and foreign ministries. I remember a German official telling me once that now we feel that the embassy is in a room next door. We can't walk across to them, but we are in dialogue with them literally as if they were talking to us from the next room. That is the reality. So, management of the relationship is a new responsibility. Of course, then there is also the question of managing the embassy itself, but that's pretty obvious. I don't have to elaborate that. My third and last point is about the new avatar of the embassy. The embassy is now changing in the sense that new types of embassies are coming into existence. There is, for example, the laptop ambassador or the laptop diplomat. Sometimes, if you have a requirement, say the president of your country is going to visit a small country in the Gulf. You don't have an embassy there. But for the purpose of the forthcoming visit, you need on-ground communication in that country. So you may send a young official or a senior official to go. He will take a room in a hotel and he will become the point of contact with that country on everything connected with the visit. Not just the preparations, which in Hindi we call bandobast, but also in relation to the substantive elements of the dialogue. Another type of embassy is pioneered by Malta and Singapore, two small states, which they call the non-resident ambassador. That is to say, they appoint somebody in the home country who wears the hat of an ambassador to a faraway country, which may be Finland, it may be Colombia, where that person visits that country a couple of times, looks after visitors who come from that country to his own country, a visiting trade minister or an environment delegation, and builds connections. Now obviously, a non-resident ambassador can't do all the work of a resident embassy, but he provides a fairly low-cost alternative to having a large network of resident embassies. There is another form. Some countries in the Caribbean have devised a formula under which they send one person to represent 8 countries of a group that is called the Organization of East Caribbean States. And it works. They are able to harmonize their interests in such a way that one single embassy represents them collectively. There is another format that's emerged, which is sharing of services. So 3-4 countries may pool resources and take up a large building and have all their diplomats and ambassadors stay in that building. The countries of the Pacific Alliance, which incidentally is a very interesting new group that has emerged in Latin America, with just 4 member countries, the members of the Pacific Alliance now have joint representative offices with individual embassies, but at one location in about 15 countries. What a brilliant idea. So I will end by saying that diplomacy and the work of embassies, the work of representation through embassies remains the same, but it evolves. And that is the story of diplomacy. It is, in fact, an old profession. Some call it the world's second oldest. And at the same time, it changes. Thank you very much. We will continue this in the next episode.